to hear me or for you to hear Kelly or anyone else just talk or lecture, but for us hopefully to be able to engage with each other a little bit and to have some conversation and discussion. The idea is to do this for several Sundays, get a feel of how things are going, and then look at the opportunity to create some ways to do this as we go forward. So today, what I want to invite you to think about with me and to think about what it means to be together. What it means to be together as a community, what it means to be together as a community of the faithful, and specifically what it means to be together in Christ. Now, as sometimes happens, as I've learned in the church, things kind of come together unexpectedly. And if you listened to Kelly's sermon a few minutes ago, you would think that she and I spent time last week sitting around talking about today what she was going to preach about. So I just want you to know that, because I told her at the end of the service a while ago, we were standing up, I said that was a great sermon, and it's going to sound like something I'm going to say today is going to sound like that we compared notes. But I want us to just to have a little bit of conversation on what it means on what it has meant to be together, on what it means to be together right now, and on how some of that has been impacted not only by the pandemic, but by some things that were already going on in our culture and our society pre-pandemic. And then what does that look like as we go forward together? One of the things that Kelly mentioned a few minutes ago was that I'm going to also come back to is how important it is, and the opportunity that we have as people who say that we follow Jesus, as people who are Christians, the opportunity that we have to be able to model that at a time by coming together in community, the opportunity we have to model that to others. So let me say just a few things, and then I want to engage. I want us to engage together. I'll tell you that the issue of being together in a community and of something called social capital is something that I've been thinking about and that I've actually talked about in several different settings before. None of us remember sermons for very long, but I've referenced it in a sermon that I preached here. But it has been an ongoing issue, the loss of that social capital, the loss of our identity as people who used to come together in a different way, not only in church, but in places like Rotary or Kiwanis and other types of things like that. There's been an erosion of that for several decades now. And so as we think now about what that means in light of what we've experienced over these last couple of years, then I think it has some pretty profound things for us to say to us about where we are, but also for some things for us to think about. This is a book written by Murthy is actually the current Surgeon General of the United States. He wrote this book during his first tenure as Surgeon General. He's the 19th and 21st Surgeon General of the United States. And when he first took on the role of Surgeon General, he decided to travel the country and to spend some time talking to people to try to help he and his staff understand, what were some of the issues that were facing us as a country, and specifically what were some of the social medical issues that we were dealing with. And the thing that he discovered, and that prompted him to write this book, the subtitle, which is The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World. The thing that he found was that the number one issue was loneliness. The number one issue was loneliness. And what he discovered was that how impactful that was on people, not only collectively, but individually, and that was impacting physical health, emotional health, and impacting us in a variety of ways.
And so not only what the work of someone like him, but what other research has shown is that there, as I said a minute ago, there continues to be this erosion of the things that have traditionally kept us together and have brought us together. Family, community, religious identity, national identity. Some of those things have not only are not like what they used to be and what some of us remember that they were, but in many cases they've just disappeared and they just don't exist. One of the things that one of the books that you may be familiar with, and I think I did reference that in a sermon that I preached here, is a book called Bowling Alone. Which was written several decades ago now, but there's been an update of it. And the premise was that there was a time when bowling leagues were a really big deal and that people came together on a very regular basis to participate in something like bowling. But what this research showed was that over the years, there had been an erosion of that, and he held that up as being an example of how one of these bonds that typically brought people together had basically just kind of gone away, even though there are still some people who do that. But the whole idea behind getting together for something like bowling had basically just stopped. Now, even when it comes to the church, there has been some thought and some speculation that things that we in the church have typically provided are things not only that have eroded and slipped away, but the reason for that is that they can be found elsewhere. And we've experienced some of this, especially during the time when we've gone to virtual worship and have offered different opportunities for worship. And you can see here, we can find friends anywhere. If you want to listen to or participate in a different type of worship service, or even the worship service of another Episcopal church, just go to the internet. We can hear great music, concerts online. We can still create some ways of getting together, small groups, whatever, in our homes. All those things are available if we take that initiative. And so why is it that we need the church? Does the church really even make a difference anymore? So some have even begun to refer to this sense of disconnect and all that we have lost in this loneliness as being an epidemic, that it has become so problematic that we are increasingly becoming more and more disconnected from each other. And then it has resulted in these types of statistics, where some people just literally say, I have one close friend maybe, and 1 in 4 have no one to even be able to confide in at all. And those are just coming out of this. This data just comes from those who are willing. Think about who are willing to divulge that and willing to talk about it. Now, it's not just in our tradition. It's not just Christianity that points to and tries to hold up the value of what it means to come together, what it means to worship together, what it means to do this together, what it means to come to God's table together. There are various religious traditions that talk about the importance of what it means to be together, what it means to come together, and how important that is not only to our connection with each other, but how that translates into a connection then with God. So in contrast to some of the questions about, well, why does the church really matter anymore if we can do all of these things in different places? Some additional different types of research and conversations have shown that it is in this setting, it is in a setting like this where people are able to really develop friendships, are really able to develop those types of relationships that go beyond what sometimes we're able to develop and to form in other places. There is just something about being together in this setting, kneeling together as we do, and saying our prayers together, confessing our sins together, and having this experience of worship, whether it's like this, whether it's on a Sunday evening, whether it's at some other time, that helps us to get beyond the me, the individualism that has contributed to a lot of this erosion of social capital and this distancing from each other, and helps us to think about the other, helps us to think about the bigger picture. So what this is going to talk about is how the model for us is what we see in the book of Acts about how those who were the very first followers of Jesus, those who made that decision for reasons that sometimes still are not always immediately clear, made the decision that they were going to follow this one who they felt was the one, was the Christ, was the Messiah. And what we know about them is that they became, and especially initially, but also for quite a while after Jesus' death and resurrection and his ascension, they became people who were together all the time, all the time. We know from what we hear and what we read, especially again in the book of Acts, that they ate together. They took care of each other, and they took care of those who were outside of their group. They spent time together around the table. They shared their lives, and they shared in many cases, they shared their possessions, not only with each other, but with others. And so that is what we have as a way of holding up the blueprint for what it means to be together now. We see it's in our DNA, so to speak. That's who we are as people who were meant to come together in a common way and in a common cause. And here is part of what I was referencing from Acts. Jacqueline. That's right. Jacqueline has many things to do with this. So thank you very much. And so this is part of what we hear about in the second chapter of Acts. Again, talking about how it is that they spent time together, they broke bread together, and also the thing that I wanted to point out here is that as a result of their being together, what came out of that was, and the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. So I think that has a lot to say about the impact of community and what it means to come together and what can potentially happen when we're willing to make that commitment. Now, as you know, Kelly talked about the church in Corinth and Paul's writing to them. And one of the things that he talks about is what it means to be part of a body. And that if some parts of the body are not connected to the body, then there really isn't a body. And it's not possible for the eye or for the hand or the foot to not be connected to the body. And there's no way that any one person can say, I have no need of you, because I need you and you need me, and we all need each other. God created us to be a connected people. And this interconnectedness is not incidental to who we are, but it is at the very core of what it means to be the church, that sense of interconnectedness. Now, one of the things that I didn't put on here, but that I frequently come back to, is the African concept of Ubuntu. And I do know that I mentioned that in a sermon, Ubuntu, U-B-U-N-T-U. And it is a word that literally describes what it means to be connected to each other. And Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who you may know died just recently, talked a lot about Ubuntu and how our own sense of being human is we're only able to realize who we are when we are connected to the others. My humanity, Bishop Tutu said, is inextricably bound up in your humanity. There cannot be a disconnect. There cannot be a David and a Connie. My humanity is bound up in Connie. Her humanity is bound up in the me. And so what we what we hear is that in some ways, in the deepest part of who we are, is that it's never good for us to be alone. It's never good for us to be independent. That we have to find ways to connect with each other. And so finally here, we talk about how that we desperately need a church that functions as a body, and that we accept liability for one another, we're available to one another, and we are accountable to one another. And that is the way in which we're able to have the deepest sense of who we are and of who we are in terms of our relationship with God. All right. So I want to just throw that out there to you in the first 15 minutes or so. And then I hope that what we can do is then I'd like to just hear from you and some of your thoughts about not only what, is this on, Kelly? About what I have said, but about maybe some of what you have experienced as we have gone through these last 2 years of having to deal with this, of having to deal with, as you see, the tape on the pews and with the distancing and at times the isolation that has compounded this sense of what it means to be disconnected.
I think politics have gotten us so divided. They actually make you not like somebody that you liked before. I mean, it's that severe. I think it's affected friendships. We lost certain friends because we just couldn't communicate anymore. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that doesn't carry over into the but also the kind of sense of hopelessness about this country, where it's going. And that makes me feel so sad and depressed. I don't know what to do about it.
Okay. Thank you. Again, thank you all for being part of this. The idea is to just throw some things out from me and from you for us together to be able to think about and to invoke some conversation. I want to leave you with this. Again, that the blueprint for us is what is not just something that's been part of the tradition, but it is what we know happened in the lives of those who committed themselves to follow Jesus from the beginning. And that they came together to be together, to learn from each other, and to develop that sense of community that enabled them to go beyond themselves and to build what we have today. The last thing I want to say to you is that one of the things that we're looking at and that I need some input from you about is how it is that we can take community beyond the walls of the church. That's quite frankly just where we are right now, is thinking about how we go out beyond ourselves to find ways to connect with each other and to do some things that are different than what we've done in the past, which has pretty much just been relying on coming together on Sundays and at other times to worship. But how do we take this sense of being together outside of the walls of St. Peter's? Thank you for being part of this. God bless you.